ReZero is known for having some of the most mentally unstable villains who seem to do evil acts just because they can. From creating what it seems like immortal monsters that went on to terrorize the world for hundreds of years, to Regulus taking and forcing hundreds of girls to marry him, all the way to Satella almost destroying the world herself. The list of their evil actions go on, but in this video I'll show you the insane logic behind why each of them act the way they do and did these things. So without further ado, let's look into the disturbing lore behind every ReZero villain. Elsa Granheart was an assassin we met early on into the series, being known as the Bow Hunter. As a child, she was abandoned and grew up on the streets of the Holy Kingdom of Gusteko. It's one of the northernmost of the world's 4 great nations, known for its freezing weather and spiritualism. Due to the harsh weather and her situation, she hurt people and stole to survive. This was until one day she finally got caught. The shop owner ended up trying to have their way with Elsa, which is when Elsa's fetish first began. Without hesitation, she slit open the shop owner's belly with a shard of glass to protect herself. This sensation made Elsa forget the coldness that enveloped her life, and for the first time she felt alive. We then fast forward 9 years before the anime starts. Elsa was one of the Featherrun sisters. These were 3 girls who allowed themselves to be experimented on by Holosio Featherrun, a member of the Gustekan Church, in order to become cursed dolls. After these experiments, they were later on ordered to fight to the death by Holosio, which Elsa ended up killing him instead. And in the end, they ended up having to fight due to one of the sisters, Sithonia, poisoning another sister named Ornea. After defeating Sithonia and departing, Elsa was intercepted by Capella, going on to serve her after being threatened with the lives of Ornea and Oliver, someone she met that was also at the Featherrun mansion. After being recruited, one of her first missions was to get Maylee, who was living with the witch beast as a pharaoh child. After getting her, she ended up teaching her, becoming close, and eventually they got paired up together. Later, she was tasked with killing an important figure from the Wallachia Empire, where while she did kill her target, she barely escaped with her life, with this memory being forever engraved in her mind. After this is where the anime starts, where she was actually hired by Roswaal to attack Emilia. While on this mission, she met Felt, who she hired to steal Emilia's insignia from her, and she got into a fight with Reinhardt that she barely escaped from. Her wounds weren't regenerating like they were supposed to, so she met up with Maylee, who patched them up for her, and they left the capital after changing their hair colors with a mob beast. Going on to watch Maylee complete her mission of stirring trouble in the area around Roswaal's manor, helping her escape after Roswaal sets the forest ablaze. The last thing that happened to Elsa and led to her death was when she and Maylee were hired by Roswaal once again to attack the manor, losing to Garfield. Daphne was one of the big bad witches of the story, known as the Witch of Gluttony. At some point in her life as a child, Daphne made contact and absorbed the gluttony witch factor, making her embody the sin of gluttony, giving her a constant and deep sense of hunger that went on to plague her entire life. She was recognized as someone to be feared due to the pure mass destruction she caused as she ate everyone and anything in sight to fulfill her unending hunger. After some time, she thought of a way to fix world hunger, which is when the creation of the Great 3 Mob Beasts came to be. Beings that went on to terrorize the world for hundreds of years. These 3 beasts were known as the Black Serpent, the Great Rabbit, and the White Whale. Her idea was that the purpose of the White Whale and the Great Rabbit would serve for an abundance of food, since the White Whale was gigantic, and the Great Rabbit, as long as you didn't kill them all at the same time, were infinite. Though the opposite of this happened, since these monstrosities were too strong, going on to terrorize the world. Now, as for the serpent, it was made for another reason, with that reason being to kill. Just like she imagined infinite food would solve the problem, she also considered that destroying life would do so as well, though even these creations couldn't save her from the fate of her starving in a desert. Sirius is known as one of the Sin Archbishops in the world, known for wrath. Not much is known about her or how she obtained her witch factor, but according to her hometown was destroyed by a witch hunt long ago, also claiming that Patelgus is the one who gave her name and her wrath. But something we do know is that in the anime she blames Emilia for stealing Patelgus away from her, and I've seen some people wonder if she's actually a twisted version of Emilia's Unfortuna, maybe made by Pandora, because they've noticed that a few things are similar. Stripe Wallachia was a former prince and the former Sin Archbishop of Pride. As a child, he was sick, which caused his family to renounce his inheritance rights to another family, exchanging him for a suitable recompense. He was then sent to train under Kurgan, the strongest warrior in Wallachia, where he was expected to die, but Kurgan ended up growing attached, taking Galactus stride. After growing into an adult, he went on to get rid of his siblings one by one, but ended up getting hit with a powerful poison which almost costed him his life. He did end up surviving, where he informed Kurgan of his visions of while he was on the line between life and death, saying he saw entities called observers who sit in the heavens toying with everyone as if they're pieces upon a chessboard. Not long after this is when Stride's destruction wish began. At some point around this, he acquired a witch factor, joined the witch cult, and received his gospel from Betelgeuse. 4 decades before where the anime starts is where he would do his final terror. What he did was rampage all across Lagunica, going on to do many acts such as arranging a duel between Kurgan and Wilhelm by cursing Theresia's father, conducting a series of attacks across the kingdom, going on to receive a forbidden art from Sphinx which allowed her to disable people's divine protections, which he used to nullify the covenant between the kingdom and the divine dragon. He went on to curse people and even kidnap Theresia, where he started his final incident known as the subjugation of the Blight Dragon, collecting sacrifices and summoning the Dragonking's parent, the Black Dragon Velgurin, binding it to the rings he had on his fingers that he was using to curse people. Going on to get into a fight against a past Roswaal and a character named Grimm, where the Roswaal of that time sacrificed herself to save the people around her. Stride ended up losing his arm when his sword rejected him as he tried to defend himself against Grimm's attack. The reason he lost his arm was because the sword spread a flame that would have burned his whole body if it wasn't due to Sasuke, someone he was with, who cut off his arm for him. Due to his arm being lost and those around him having to fight enemies, Stride was left defenseless and fell off the dragon's back, going on to be eaten with his wife by Velgrin, a dragon he was controlling, though the dragon's attacks didn't stop there because it was still under the influence of the rings, going on to seriously wound both Grimm and Wilhelm until it was defeated by Geonis Lagunica, the king of the dragon kingdom of Lagunica, who used the divine dragon. Gaston, Rachin, and Camberley were 3 thugs that attacked Subaru at the beginning of the story, but only one of them has their own lores, so let's look into him. Starting with Rachin's, he was a runaway noble from the royal capital of Lagunica. They don't explain why he ran away, but he left his family and began living in the slums, which is where he met Gaston. From there, 3 months before Subaru's arrival, the 3 of them went on to meet an imperial trader who paid them and 15 other thugs a hefty amount of gold to tell a divine general, who was after his head. The thugs didn't follow the plan though and actually tried robbing the general, but unfortunately for them, they were dealing with the strongest person from the sacred Wallachia Empire. They ended up getting defeated within a second and arrested, which is where the trio went on to meet Julius and Ferris, who wanted to know the imperial trader's location, promising to free them if they told them, which they did. Typhon is another member of the Witches of Sins reigning over Pride. As a child, she had a hard time with the concept of good and evil, especially since her father had executed people as part of his job. After breaking his wine glass one day, she feared execution after telling him what she did, but instead he accepted her apology, which prompted her to believe that the scale that measured someone's sin was inside their own heart. Following this event, she went on to judge people by asking if they were sinners and brought down punishment to those who were guilty, similar to what she did to Subaru. With the use of her witch factor Pride she obtained sometime as a child, she went on to mercilessly judge and execute people all across the world, even judging her own father. Sometime after this, she ended up going to Priscilla, where she drowned in the city's trap. Sekhmet was another one of the witches reigning over Sloth. Being born to the giant clan, Sekhmet had big things that were expected from her, especially since her clan wanted to bring back their founder known as God. Though she couldn't live up to those expectations, which caused them to hold her in disdain and abandon her as a punishment. Not long after, people came and captured her, taking her down to the city where they lived. There, she learned all types of knowledge, a way of life, and emotions. One day, due to not understanding that the feelings she had was positive, she decided to snap the necks of the men in the place she lived in and decided to go back to her homeland and obliterate her entire clan, feeling nothing but hatred and a desire for revenge, which she didn't understand at the time. After they were gone, she felt peace, later going on to go to the Great Waterfall, where she went on to fight a divine dragon named Volcanica and falling to her death. What is said to be more than 100 years ago, Regulus lived with his family in a village of a small country, living with his alcoholic father, his mother, and his 2 brothers who were mean to him. At some time in his life, he ended up being chosen as a Sin Archbishop and obtained the witch factor of greed, which he used to fulfill his greatest desires, starting with getting rid of both his family, the village that looked down on him, then eventually his entire home country, breaking the mind of the girl he loved in his childhood, slaughtering her family and forcing her to marry him. Though this didn't last long, and after her death, he went on to take many wives in this same way, forcing them all to remain expressionless and never smile like his childhood friend did. From here, he joined the witch cult, met Betelgeuse, and spent most of his days searching for beautiful women to forcefully marry and spend his days with. Now, going 100 years before the anime starts, is where Regulus participated in the attack on the elven village with Pandora. One of the reasons he went in the first place was to collect Fortuna as his 79th wife, which is when he got into a battle against Betelgeuse and seriously wounded him about to take his life until Pandora stopped him. He obviously didn't like this, so he killed her instantly, but due to her authority, she made it so her death never happened and sent him back to his mansion, reverting all the damage he did to both Betelgeuse and the forest. After this, he later went on to attack the city of Garkla and Wallachia, killing Kurgan and everyone there, attack Rem and Krush on their way back with Gluttony, and finally reach his end in the recent arc against Subaru, Emilia, and Reinhardt. Being a failed creation of Ekidona, where she was trying to create copies of Ruzu, Sphinx was able to escape shortly before getting disposed of, going on to wander the world to fulfill the purpose of why she was created, which was to replicate the Witch of Greed. Though due to being a failed creation, her body was unfit for survival in the harsh conditions of the world. Due to this, and the fact that her body couldn't grow or train, she instead pursued knowledge and skills that didn't depend on the state of her body. To survive, she even became a slave of a lavish master, going on to learn and understand the world for more than 150 years. Hopping home to home until she could obtain the means to protect herself, not staying in one location for too long since she shared the same race as the Witch of Envy and didn't want to incur Roswaal's fury. She ended up becoming a magician, which took nearly 100 times the effort to become a magician that it would take the normal person due to her body's condition. After a while, she was able to stabilize herself, where she went on to try to learn more about Ekidona, though she had a hard time due to the witch cult's efforts in concealing information about the other witches. It took her 350 years of trying methods that all ended up in failure to bring back the Witch of Greed. Seeing that this didn't work, she would later on join the Demi-Human Alliance and the war between humans and demi-humans, where she met the leaders Valga and Libre. The reason she joined was because of her appearance as a half-elf. She shared information of the Witch of Envy and recreated the Sacrament of the Immortal King, which was a book capable of reviving the dead, though she had them keep secret about her involvement in its creation. She was a key figure in the war with her magic circles, setting soldiers from the royal army ablaze, leading to the Demi-Human Alliance victory, going on to resurrect countless fallen soldiers with the Sacrament of the Immortal King, where she got caught by Roswaal, leading to her existence becoming known in the kingdom and being branded a witch. She would go on to work on more complex systems of magic circles, which didn't end up working on Roswaal, so she decided to run, going on to design the forbidden art that negates the users of divine protections from utilizing their abilities, which was used to nullify the kingdom of Lagunica's covenant with the divine dragon. After this, she would go on to enact an attack on the Lagunica castle with reanimated corpses, running into Grimm, Carol, and Roswaal, where she barely escaped death by escaping into the sewers, but not before getting both of her arms cut off. She would then get captured by Leap Burial, who lied about her death to Roswaal and kept her alive for his benefit. Now, if we fast forward 7 months before the anime starts, Leap would aim to take away the will of Priscilla, his wife, by using Sphinx's power to make her into a puppet, hoping to rule the kingdom if Priscilla won, but this plan was ruined when he was killed by Al. That was his death, but Sphinx would later on attempt to lure Priscilla into a trap to take over her body by using a water wheel alongside the river in the Burial Barony, in order to spread an infection using parasites she made to get Priscilla to show up there. However, this failed due to Al removing a parasite within Priscilla after Ada Rayfast, the infected water wheel manager and the host of the Parasite Queen, was burnt to ash. After this failure, Sphinx would go on to think about her next course of action, and driven with nothing but wanting to get revenge of Priscilla, decided to go to Priscilla's homeland, Wallachia, to complete herself and attain her revenge. setting forth to Wallachia after regaining her lost limb somehow. Pandora is one of the last surviving witches, having ran into her witch factor at some point in her life. She has the witch factor of vainglory and is known as the Witch of Vainglory. Like I said, she's one of the last surviving witches and the only witch roaming free since Satella has been sealed away and Hector is either missing or dead. Like we saw in the anime, she has ties to the witch coat and they treat her with respect, following her orders. We see this where even Regulus did as she instructed. Around 100 years ago, she told Regulus to accompany her to Eleanor Forest with the intent of breaking the seal that lied there, running into both Patelgus and Fortuna, telling them of her intent to break the seal. Things then turned hostile, where Patelgus used the witch factor of sloth to try to fight back, which Pandora commended him for, giving him the title of Sin Archbishop of Sloth. Pandora was shown to be able to bring herself back to life and even remove Regulus from the forest back to his mansion, undoing all the damage he did. Later running into Emilia due to her leading Emilia with the lesser spirits she followed and promising her she wouldn't hurt anyone as long as she opened the seal. But following Fortuna's promise, Emilia declined, which is when what we saw in the anime happened. Pandora confused Patelgus, making him think he was attacking her instead, making him deal a fatal blow to Fortuna, which drove him into despair. Emilia lost control, attacking Pandora over and over again, eventually freezing herself in the entire forest, and both Patelgus and Pandora left the forest together. Later showing up 14 years before the anime start to stop Theresia and her soldiers' assault on the White Well, turning Theresia into the puppet we saw in the anime. Being born to the multi-arm clan, Kurgan was blessed with more arms than normal, going on to raise his clan status and protect the lands from the Wallachian lord who sought it. This started his rise to fame, and he went on to become Wallachia's strongest warrior. Sometime after this, he was given responsibility over Stride, who he took care of as if he was his child, going on to take care of him and guard him, disobeying the wishes of the Wallachian Empire who sought his death. Then, around when Stride was older, during Stride's rampage in Lagunica, after taking a loss against both Picolet and Wilhelm, Kurgan ended up being the only survivor and was reduced to a mere slave in the fortified city of Garkla. Decades later, he helped against the rampage by Regulus, where he prevented the Prince of Garkla from dying due to him reminding him of Stride. After this action, he was granted his demon cleavers and took up arms against Regulus, which, while he did get in the way of Regulus, allowing survivors to evacuate, the city fell within just 1 hour. This resulted in him dying in this battle, but we all know he's later resurrected by Pandora. For Lai, Ruin, and Roy, being known as the Archbishops of Gluttony, these three have caused terror throughout the world by consuming people's names left and right. If we look into their past, according to Roy, Lai, Ruin, his birth parents died shortly after their births. They ended up getting sent to live with foster parents who they didn't seem to get along with. Also, something to mention is that their lives didn't end up being easy since Lai had numerous scars on his body, meaning there was probably some troubles at home. There's a lot we don't know about their past, but what we do know is that Lai seems to have a grudge against merchants due to a past encounter with them, and that they met their sister Rui for the first time after becoming a Sin Archbishop. The way they met her was through the use of their solar eclipse ability. Being known as another one of the big bad witches, known for greed, the earliest we see into Echidona's past is around when her, Satella, Flugel, Reed Astrea, Farcel Lagunic, and Alec Hoshin were traveling the world together for some reason, with Alec saying that they were on a mission to save the world. Sometime later, she ended up acting as a tutor for Roswal after saving him, which is when in the next few years she created 3 creations, with the first being Puck and the last being Beatrice, which means the second one she created could either be a clone of Ryuzu or Ekida. But while we don't really see when or how she got her authority, we do know her goal was to research a means of immortality. She was trying to achieve this by transferring a soul into a body that belonged to someone else, which is how the sanctuary came to be. It was a place where she gathered humans and demi-humans alike to support the barrier, going on to hire Patelgus to mentor Beatrice at some point in this time. But just before they were able to achieve this, they were attacked by Hector, who nearly killed Roswal. Echidona ended up saving Roswal's life, and with the help of Ryuzu sacrificing herself, they were able to activate the sanctuary and save the lives of everyone inside of it. Though, due to Ryuzu sacrificing herself, Echidona ended up creating various copies, but none were exactly like the original. Later going on to collect the souls of Typhon, Minerva, Daphne, Carmilla, Sekhmet, and taking them with her to the sanctuary where she most likely later took them to the dream world. While we don't know much about her past, we do know she claims to have helped find Karage, one of the 4 great nations in the world, and was acquainted with Emilia's mother, Pandora, and the Divine Dragon. Betelgeuse, who was the crazy archbishop you saw in the anime, didn't always act this way. Zeus began his life as a lesser spirit of Earth around 400 years ago, going on to co-found the witch cult for some unknown reason, being appointed the title of archbishop without even having an authority. The authority he would later consume would be Sloth, which was entrusted to him by Flugel. He seemed to have had connections to both Flugel and Echidna. We don't really know what their relationships were, but we do know that they were well acquainted, as he did go on to tutor Beatrice, and seeing that Flugel trusted him with something important. Sometime later, he ended up meeting Fortuna, who he befriended and began to bring stuff from the outside world. After meeting her, he learned of the seal, which he came to check on periodically, going on to meet Emilia, who was of great importance to him for some reason. I believe it may have been because he might have had a connection to her parents, or the fact that she resembled Satella. Since we do know he had a connection to Satella, but them meeting caused him to break down in tears. From here, they went on to bond together, becoming a happy little family, though this didn't last long, since not long after this is when Pandora and Regulus arrived to the forest, bringing with them the wrath of the Black Serpent, which was created by Daphne. To stop both Regulus and Pandora, Betelgeuse resorted to his final trump card, the Factor of Sloth, after apologizing to Flugel, the person who entrusted it to him. This caused him to experience excruciating pain, but gave him the ability of the Unseen Hands. Using this power, he went on to fight Regulus, but was beaten down in a one-sided fight, getting saved by Pandora, who sent Regulus away just before he could finish off him. Her sending him away reverted all the damage that was done to him, which fully healed Betelgeuse's near-destroyed body, and after this led to the tragic event that would go on to scar Betelgeuse for life and turning him into the crazy archbishop we saw in the anime. What happened was Pandora tricked him into thinking Fortuna was her with her witch factor, which caused him to deal a lethal blow to Fortuna. This ended up shattering his mind, plunging him into the depths of despair and insanity. From here, he went on to follow Pandora, accept the seat of Sloth, and go on to slaughter entire towns and villages, acting according to what his gospel said up until he was taken down by Subaru and his group. Growing up at the House of Decroy, Belleroy was adopted by Miles when he was a child. Miles was a flying dragon rider who served Serena Decroy in the sacred Wallachia Empire's Imperial Army. Due to Miles taking him in, Belleroy had grown a deep attachment to Miles, thinking of him as a sworn brother, going on to even hatch a baby dragon just to be like him. Belleroy went on to become an Imperial soldier, going on to do great things such as stopping a revolution, becoming a member of the Divine Generals, and teaching a young girl. Everything was going great up until a few months before the anime start, where Miles unfortunately died during a mission in Lagunic. Hearing of this, Belleroy plotted his revenge during a mission, while 2 members of the Council of Wise were being guarded by Reinhard, Julius, and Ferris on a diplomatic mission to the Empire in order to sign a non-aggression pact between the kingdom and the Empire. Since he believed that Reinhard killed his sworn brother, while on this trip, Belleroy faked his own death, which ended up getting Reinhard labeled as guilty for his murder. This ended up getting cleared when he got caught and ended up in a deadly duel versus Julius where he lost his life. Carmilla was originally a normal girl living in a village of a small country 400 years ago. She had a fiancé and was loved by her village. Life was great. Up until one day when a strange man of power came to the village and decided he would have her. Not liking what they heard, the village was outraged and ended up fighting this man and burning down his mansion. What this did was make the surrounding villages and cities see them as dangerous, which caused more fighting, and somehow this village ended up toppling countries, claiming it was all for Carmilla's sake, regarding her as a heavenly maiden. The villagers didn't know it, but they were being misled by their own warped ideals, since this wasn't what she wanted. It was most likely caused by her authority, which in the story it doesn't say when she received it, but one of its abilities allows her to both captivate people and make them see and hear what they want to see and hear. But their actions ended up causing her to despair since what she originally wanted no longer existed. This made her decide to leave, later being burnt alive. Being Argyll, being the father to Ferris, several years before Ferris came to live with Crush, the Argyll family lost everything. The Argyll family lost everything due to it being discovered that Bean and his wife had Ferris locked up. The reason they did this was due to his demi-human characteristics. This action ended up losing them everything, which caused them to settle down somewhere quiet and live with the little stuff they had left. This is probably around where Ferris went to stay with Crusch, but some years later, after an unfortunate event, Bean's wife ended up dying, causing him to desperately search for a way to bring her back, preserving her body the best he could with magic. With this being the only thing on his mind, he went on to turn to the Sacrament of the Immortal King, which was a spell capable of resurrecting the dead. He went on to experiment with this, but due to the curse being incomplete, it wasn't possible. The reason the curse was incomplete was due to half of the inscription being lost over the ages, and his magic prowess wasn't enough to complete it, leading to the creation of mindless undead. With no breakthrough for years, one day he went on to meet Miles, who at the time was a merchant who dealt with the sale of corpses. Miles would go on to assist him in experiments by providing him corpses at the time, which would go on to catch the eye of Crusch. This would cause her to lead around 50 soldiers to go and investigate the matter, though unbeknownst to them, this was a trap to lure her and Ferris back to the estate. This trap ended up being successful, and this is where Bean revealed his dark plan. Using actual corpses to fight Crusch's troops, he threatened Ferris to use the Sacrament of the Immortal King to revive his wife, believing that Ferris' superior talent could make it work. Due to the threat, Ferris did end up doing it, and it actually worked, though she looked like a malnourished husk like the rest of the zombies. While Bean was overjoyed, Hannah, their maid, ended up strangling him to death suddenly. Roswaal has so much history and information going back entire eras, all the way to the first Roswaal, Atelier Mathers. He was born into the Mathers family, which was a noble house active within the Dragon City of Lagunica. They were a wealthy family, and Atelier was born with an incredible latent magic talent, though in this era there wasn't a lot of information regarding it, leading to him struggling to comprehend this power. It also led to him experiencing an unknown excruciating pain no doctor could diagnose. One day while experiencing this pain is when he would run into Echidna. He ended up barfing on her and himself, which caused him to try to apologize, which she didn't care about, instead kissing him to extract the magic that was causing him the pain. She went on to inform him of the dangers of this pain, and that the way to get rid of it was to use magic on a consistent basis, since if you let it build up, it starts to poison you. She explained that the reason she knew this is because she suffered similar problems in her childhood, leading to Atelier breaking into tears because someone finally understood him. She then told him her name after he asked, which was the evil witch, the Witch of Greed, Echidna. He then went on to introduce himself as well and eventually became her loyal apprentice, eventually falling deeply in love with her, going on to later expel his parents and siblings from his house, which led to him becoming the family head, changing his name to Roswaal A. Mathers. Pay attention to his name because it'll be important, but from here he went on to hone his abilities in magic and become one of the top mages in the kingdom, which is around when the Warlock of Melancholy, Hector, located them. To buy time, Roswaal confronted Hector but was easily defeated and almost killed, which is when Echidna saved him, but this defeat greatly demoralized him. It also made it so he could never heal himself fully again. This defeat led him to spiral down the evil path of sinister magic, leading to his mind changing, and with the death of Echidna, Roswaal went on to possess his descendants with the purpose of bringing her back, going on to even possess the body of his son Roswaal B. Mathers. Then at some point later, he possessed the body of Roswaal D. Mathers, which was when he tried to convince Beatrice to come out of the Forbidden Library. This was unsuccessful, but here he began to make preparations for the royal selection, which was being prepared for 4 generations. The next information we get is when he's on Roswaal L. Mathers, which means he's been possessing his descendants for 11 whole generations. But upon being robbed by a small kid, he chased after the kid, demanding the return of his stolen golden feather ornament. This is where he was confronted by the kid's boss and was knocked out due to not being accustomed to his new body. After Roswaal woke up, he noticed a man standing over him. His name was Russell Fellow, and he explained that Roswaal was most likely robbed by an organization known as the Brotherhood, who were running rampant in the royal capital, stealing from the rich and demanding rights and equality for the poor. Roswaal ended up teaming up with Russell and they started their search for the stolen ornament, later running into a boy who told the two that his father, Heinkel Estrella, was working on the street they were traveling on. What Heinkel was doing was trying to convince Marcos Gildark to rejoin the Royal Army. Roswaal ended up interjecting and started a fight with Marcos after bantering. He ended up winning due to Marcos surrendering, but Roswaal couldn't accept his given victory, telling Marcos to keep going. It seems that the reason behind their fight was because Marcos was most likely the guy who knocked him out. Seeing as he lost, Marcos ends up calling the boy who took Roswaal's ornament, and after receiving it and hearing why Marcos is involved with the Brotherhood, Roswaal requested him to become his accomplice, going on to form an alliance between the Brotherhood and the Golden Wing faction, because they both wanted to make a change in the kingdom. From here, he helped save Serena Dracoy from assassins sent after her by her father, let the Witch Coat attack the last Oni village so he could pick up both Rim and Ram, since Ram was designated as important to his plans by the Book of Wisdom. As for how he got the book, it was most likely from Echidna, since I believe she was the one who created it. Then, 7 years prior to the anime start, he decided to release his staff in preparations for the chaos of the royal selection, which is why we see only Ram and Rim. Later going on to confront both Emilia and Puck, getting in a fight with Puck for half a day, and declared Emilia as a potential royal candidate by giving her an insignia promising her dragon blood if she wins that she could use to unfreeze the forest. With this, he brought her back to the mansion to teach her about the country and her duties. Now, a few days before the anime start, he was aware of Subaru's sudden appearance in the royal capital, he knew he was looping, and his infatuation with Emilia. So to get Subaru to come to the mansion, he hired Elsa Grainhart to attack Emilia, which is the events you saw in the anime. And later in the story, he and a few others convinced the Western nobles into backing Emilia. Basically, he was working behind the scenes, following what his gospel said to do. Almost every attack by Elsa and Meili was him hiring them to do so he could push Subaru into making certain choices, or into a corner to reset the loop if things weren't going to plan. The last thing we see from him is that he did end up losing the bet against Subaru and was forced to get rid of his gospel, but I doubt this is the end of his scheming. Born unable to feel pain, Ugar Valakia was born to become the future Emperor of Briar. As an infant, he was cursed with the Curse of Thorns by an unknown curse arts user. Whether it be for the user's own volition or someone else's, this curse, while it didn't affect him due to him not being able to feel pain, it affected those around him, forcing him to live a life of solitude while the curse was eating away at his body. Now, sometime later, his body had grown used to the curse, acting as a symbiotic relationship, which is where he went on to train himself and use his talent to grow insanely powerful. Then around 300 years before the anime start, Ugart would go on to meet a village girl named Iris. Shortly after he was betrayed and had his throne taken from him, is when Iris would go on to shelter him, leading to the two of them falling in love. Though unfortunately, due to the betrayal from the mole human and wolf human races, Iris would go on to die. This caused Ugart to descend into madness, choosing to eradicate the races that betrayed him, also bringing Iris back to life by casting a curse known as the Soul Marriage Curse on her, which forced her soul to rise again. While he did end up bringing her back to life, this prevented her from ever dying, causing her to reincarnate endlessly. Being known as another one of the Witches of Sins, Minerva came into contact with her witch factor of pride at some point in her life, giving her the power to heal a person's wounds by hitting them. Sometime later, people around her would be constantly fighting, which would anger her, causing her to train herself so she could gain enough power to stop them. As she fought, she came to understand the feeling she was feeling was rage and not sorrow, causing her to start punching people, resulting in their wounds being healed. From that point on, she would go on to travel the world, healing people in need. But due to her being called a Witch of Sin and her power, many people wished to capture her. Many end up being unsuccessful until around 400 years ago, where she was baited in due to someone using a bunch of elves as collateral damage to trap her. She would try to save them, but would go on to fall under the influence of the trap, where she went mad and died at the hands of Satella. Hector, being the person who attacked both Roswaal and Echidna around 400 years ago, Hector pursued them for some unknown reason, causing them to flee to the sanctuary where he almost killed Roswaal and battled against Echidna. The outcome of their fight is uncertain, but it's safe to assume that he lived. I believe he does end up dying later at some point, leading to his witch factor being passed on to a person named Clind. Originating from Wallachia, Yai was trained to become a shinobi. going on to completely master how to manipulate her latent mana while she was in the single digits of age. She was truly a genius, growing a reputation, which is why not long after she was tasked with a mission of infiltrating Leap Burial's staff, and was commissioned to closely observe Priscilla by Priscilla's previous husband, Leap Burial. If we fast forward a bit, in Lagunica she ended up getting hired as a maid in the Burial Manor by Leap Burial shortly before his death. Yae would go on to work beside Priscilla and Al in a zombie infestation in Kofuton, where Al and Yae would be ambushed while confronting Ada Rayfast. They ended up getting trapped and Al would fall into a giant pit. Ordered by Priscilla to search for Al, it's around this time that Yae was given the order to assassinate Priscilla, which Al knew. Knowing this, he gave her the offer to abandon her goal, which she declined, causing the two to fight. Al ended up using his authority to instill fear into Yae, which resulted in her becoming his servant, motivated by the sole wish to ascertain his death in the future. After traveling the world with Flugel and the others, at some point in their journeys, Satella came into contact with the Witch Factor of Envy, though she had no compatibility with it, causing the creation of her Witch of Envy personality. After absorbing it, something led to her going out of control and nearly destroying half the world. It's said that this alternate personality wasn't the reason, but this caused Flugel and the others to seal her since she couldn't be killed. Being introduced early on into the series as a shy girl with her dog, the twist behind Meily's true personality was something else, a dark side we'd never expected. Meily Petrus was abandoned by her parents as a child and grew up in the wilderness surrounded by mob beasts. Due to her having the ability to manipulate the behavior of mob beasts, instead of them harming her, they protected her. As a result, she turned out feral with no comprehension of even basic speech. This would all change one day when she met Elsa. Elsa would go on to kill the mob beast and take her in, calling her Meily due to being sewn into the clothes she was wearing. Elsa would go on to teach Meily many things such as talking, how to behave, and a lot more, going on to bring her with her to Capella where they were paired up together. They would go on a couple of missions together all the way up to the start of the anime where we saw Elsa's defeat and near death to Reinhardt. With her barely escaping, the person who picked her up was Meily, who patched her wounds, and they decided to leave the capital. Right after their escape is when Meily would receive an order that conflicted with this by Capella, who they call Mother, to store mayhem around Roswald's manor, which we saw happen where she sent multiple mob beasts called Walgarms to cause destruction. Roswald did end up destroying them, which caused Meily to flee with Elsa, who was watching from afar. They laid low, later on showing up again after she and Elsa were hired by Roswald to push Subaru's desperation, ending in Elsa's death. This was the last we saw of her for now, but I believe she does play a role later on in the story in the Pallades Watchtower arc. Being a subordinate of Serena de Croix, Miles visited an orphanage in Averick, where he met and brought back two children, with those being Flop and Medium O'Connell. We meet them later in the story, but he took them back with him after allowing them to beat up the head of the orphanage for payback. Fast forwarding 7 years before the anime starts, both Miles and Belleroy, a boy who was adopted by Miles, were sent to the Pendleton estate in order to invite Priscilla and Jorah Pendleton to the Gladiator Island Ginnungagap, which was an island where slaves and criminals became gladiators for the entertainment of the Empire's citizens. But the gladiators would go on to spark a revolution which would be stopped by the Imperial Army, but this would cause the group to go back to the Pendleton mansion. Fast forward some time, Miles would be tasked with getting information on the Sacrament of the Immortal King, which was a forbidden art capable of reviving the dead, which is why in Bean's story he posed as a merchant selling corpses, something we talked about earlier. While finding out the reason behind Bean's actions to save his wife, Miles helped him by procuring corpses for him while secretly taking notes about the spell. This plan would be halted because of Krush, which caused them to kidnap her, leading to a raid being sent on the Argyll mansion. This also led to the deaths of both Bean and his maid. Now as for Miles, he barely escaped with a mortal wound. Mal managed to fake his death and escape on a flying dragon by fleeing through a secret passageway, hoping to turn over the little information he had on the Sacrament of the Immortal King. But Miles made his way to the border of Wallachia where he was caught by Reinhardt and ended up dying after refusing to surrender. Being a bandit in Garklug, Todd and others came to interfere with the rebuilding process that was launched after the destruction from Regulus. Todd was a leader of the bandits but wanted to quit and join the Imperial Army. He planned on betraying his fellow bandits and turning them in, but a soldier named Jamal ended up slaying one of the leaders, causing the bandits to cease their attack on Garkla. This caused his plan to end in failure, which he later on ended up meeting Jamal and was introduced to his younger sister, Katya, who became his fiancée a year later. The last we know is that him and Jamal would go on to talk about a revolt that was happening and ended up stopping it. He was the only one that turned a new leaf. But our last is the last of the Sin Archbishops, Capella Emerita Lugunica. Very little is known about Capella's past. We don't know when she became an archbishop, but what we do know is that 9 years before Subaru came into the world, Capella was looking for objects that related to the legacy of the witches, just like what they were requesting in Watergate City. What she wanted was a fox-like artificial spirit created by Echidna, tasking multiple people to capture it, but they all ended up in failure, prompting her to punish them, going on to later intercept Elsa, who was departing from the Featherrun mansion, threatening her with the lives of people she cared about to follow her. Elsa would later go on to bring Melee, which Capella would team them up. So Capella was the person behind their attacks and why they were such menaces in the anime. The last we would see of Capella is in the Watergate City arc, where she demanded the items that had to do with the witches, and would escape after a fight with Owl and saying that she got what she came here for. If you made it to the end and enjoyed, you might as well like and subscribe, since I'll be bringing more content like this. It would tell me that you guys want to see me go over the lore of more characters. Also, I'm trying to hit 10k, so I would really appreciate it. Click one of the videos on the screen because YouTube thinks you might enjoy them, and I'll see you guys in the next one.